All right, welcome to the January 3rd Human Services Committee meeting. Happy New Year to everyone up here and also out there in the world. We're going to get started with a roll call for quorum checks. I believe one of our members is participating remotely. So if we could call the roll, please.
Councilmember Harris. Present. Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Ravel. Here. Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here. We have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. We are going to go to public comment next. It looks like we have one public commenter, Don Ziegler. Good to see you.
Good evening and Happy New Year. Dear members of the Human Services Committee, my name is Don Ziegler. I'm chair of the Evanston Health Advisory Council and faculty member of UIC School of Public Health. I live at 1430 Elmwood in the 4th Ward. I'm speaking on my behalf tonight against the recent proposal to amend city ordinances to allow cannabis smoking establishments. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, secondhand marijuana smoke contains many of the same toxic and cancer-causing chemicals found in tobacco smoke and contains some of those chemicals in higher amounts. The American Lung Association states that no one should be exposed to secondhand marijuana smoke. According to the Tobacco Control Legal Consortium, to protect public health, improve consistency, and aid enforcement, smoke-free laws for public places and workplaces should include tobacco as well as marijuana, whether it is smoked or aerosolized. Allowing marijuana smoking in places where smoking is now prohibitive could undermine laws that protect the public from exposure to secondhand smoke. Many other communities have taken action already. As of October of last year, 876 localities and 38 states, territories, and commonwealths restrict marijuana use in some or all smoke-free spaces. Of these, 468 localities in 23 states, territories, and commonwealths prohibit smoking and vaping of recreational and marijuana tobacco in one or more of the following venues: non-hospitality workplaces, restaurants, bars, and/or gambling facilities. Inasmuch as Evanston has been a leader in tobacco control and other public health measures, I'm convinced that amending city ordinances to allow cannabis smoking establishments is not only unwise, but would also undercut one priority of our E-Plan. That is, it would definitely not advance health and racial equity. In conclusion, I agree with the Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights that in the interest of public health, the use of combustible or aerosolized marijuana should be prohibited wherever tobacco smoking is prohibited. Thank you, members.
And if you don't mind, David, because I looked on the website, I'm just trying to see so this is the Health Advisory Council, or maybe Director Obo, you can help me understand more about this council.
So this is a council. Good day. Ike Obo, Director, Health and Human Services Director. The Evanston Health Council was established many years ago, and it comprises of many individuals who are in academia, public health, the medical field, and social services. And their stance is to provide advice to our Health and Human Services Department in the way in which we provide community health / public health in Evanston. We meet on a regular basis to discuss health issues. Their input has been very paramount in our E-Plan. And also for those who are here when we established Evanston 21. They were very instrumental in establishing Evanston 21 when it comes to tobacco. So this is a council that I refer a number of matters to that are health related, and they provide advice and recommendations to those public health issues.
And is there a reason why I'm not finding it on the city website? Is it there and I'm just missing it?
I'm sure it's.
Is this an official city
So this is
council or committee?
So this is just a council. They're an advisory board to the Health and Human Services Department. And as I mentioned, this was a board that was established.
So they're not an official city committee, which is why I'm not able to find them on the city's website, meaning they don't have, like, the selection manner. They're not
A board or commission.
they're not seated by the mayor and they don't have terms, and
This is solely an advisory
Okay.
committee to the health department.
that was my understanding. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else, would anyone else like to make a public comment either on Zoom or in person? Going once, going twice, all right. Next up, items for consideration. We're gonna start off with HS1, if I can have a motion, please.
I will move item HS1.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been properly moved by Councilmember Reed and seconded by Councilmember Hadakatis. And we'll open it up for discussion. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Well, we can open up for discussion. I will say I plan to table this. I have requested so folks may recall that the last time we discussed this, or maybe the time before that, Ansel Glink was the corporation counsel at that time, and they provided an oral opinion. It wasn't in writing. And so before this meeting, I asked for that opinion, which does conflict, I believe, with our law department opinion at this time. If they could reduce that to writing and provide it in a memo that we could include in the packet, to use that as part of, as we deliberate on this issue. So if everybody's okay with that, I wanted to table this to allow for more time to receive that memo. So we can also get their opinion as well. And then if there's any other, Councilman Reed, I know you're on the, if there's anything you want to say on the matter, but I plan to table.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to table this. I think we all do recall, I think everyone is here, maybe Councilmember Ravel may have been out that particular meeting, but I believe everyone, and Councilmember Harris was not here at the time either. So I do think it's helpful to have that opinion from Julie Tappendorf. I don't know if our current law department disagrees with Ansel Blink. I think this memo is from Chief Stewart, just to be clear. And what Ansel Blink told us at the time, and we'll get it in another memo, is that it seems as though there's nothing in the statute that requires us to proactively release what we call the daily crime bulletin, specifically emailing it out to potentially thousands of folks. Folks who are on that list have not been convicted of a crime. It could give out the wrong message. It potentially causes undue burden to residents who have not yet been found guilty. I think it's important to note that there are a number of items that are required to be furnished according to the statute, including mugshots and other information that we do not currently release in the daily crime bulletin. And so I think it makes sense for us to, in the public distribution of the daily crime bulletin without request. And so I'll just, with that, move to table this to the next meeting to be supplemented with the information requested by Councilmember Burns, the Julie Tappendorf memo.
All right, that HS1 was properly moved to be tabled to our next meeting. And it was seconded as well. And then we'll All those in favor of tabling HS1 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, any nays? All right, the ayes have it. All right, moving on to still under items or actually no, items for discussion, HS1. Can someone move item HS1, please?
I'll move item HS1 under items for discussion. The amendment to city ordinances to allow cannabis consumption lounges.
All right, it's been properly moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, I'm happy to kick this off. I made a referral a while ago to allow for cannabis consumption lounges. It is allowed under state law. There are other municipalities that are moving to allow cannabis consumption lounges. It's a great tax opportunity. I certainly understand and hear what the gentleman from our health advisor group is mentioning. This would not allow cannabis consumption at regular establishments. These would be designated places. So similar to what the gentleman said, that we shouldn't allow cannabis consumption in places where tobacco isn't able to be consumed. Certainly there are cigar lounges, there are hookah lounges, there are places where you can consume tobacco in an area that is designated specifically for the consumption of tobacco, thereby not exposing folks who don't want to be in that environment to that environment. So the similar situation would be established here for cannabis consumption. As I said, it's a revenue opportunity. It's an entertainment opportunity for folks who consume in that, similar to alcohol.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I do have to say that I found Mr. Ziegler's comments to be very helpful and important, and I'm inclined to agree with his view that this would be a mistake. I guess I have a question about what actually we're being asked to do here. I mean, we're not, this is for discussion, so we're not really being asked to approve an ordinance. Question mark.
Not today, yeah, no, this is only for discussion, and I believe this is Councilmember Reed's referral, so he can describe his intent.
Well, yeah, the intent is for an ordinance to be put forward. I would have preferred, again, an ordinance to have been put forward at this point, but to get direction. I think following in line with what Mr. Ziegler is saying, I'm hearing the real concern is that we don't want folks, consuming cannabis, in open air or in spaces where cigarette consumption or tobacco consumption isn't allowed. This would not be the case. The idea here is to create designated establishments that would go through some permitting process in order to establish a cannabis consumption lounge. Under state law with tobacco consumption lounges and cannabis consumption lounges, there are regulations as to the air filtration and a whole host of other regulations. And so I'd want our law department to draft our local ordinance in alignment with state law. When you look at, and I agree, I mean, are there dangers to cannabis, and do we want, sure. I mean, but, if you look at the hierarchy of substances, alcohol causes far more societal harm potentially than cannabis and other substances that we currently criminalize. And so I think it makes sense under our current framework to allow for cannabis consumption lounges, particularly given that our reparations program is so tied to cannabis revenue.
Councilmember Harris.
I was just wondering if we have any precedents and places that I can look up where they've already done this, how it works, what the attitude of the cities that are hosting these smoking establishments, if we have any of that information, Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, and I don't refer them as, I wish that my referral was for cannabis consumption lounges. I believe Chicago is moving toward allowing consumption lounges. Councilmember Burns, I don't know if you're familiar with some downstate consumption lounges. You know, some of this it's fairly new, as cannabis was just legalized in the last few years, and folks are just, you know, in the last year or two moving toward these consumption lounges.
Do we have any evidence?
I think this is just for discussion, so we can, it's a good, good information that we can bring back for the next meeting. It's a good question. Anything else, Councilmember Harris?
Yeah, actually, so would they be selling the cannabis or people, would it be BYOB, bring your own bud? What are we doing?
I think that is regulated by state statute and.
My understanding is that,
Go ahead, Councilman Reed.
correct. No, go ahead.
You can go ahead. It's your referral. You can-
Yeah. So that's regulated by state statute. My, you know, again, my goal would be to have this drafted in alignment with state statute.
Which is what? I don't know. So can you tell me what that is?
So for dispensing organizations, it's pretty clear. So you can, you're allowed to have a consumption lounge at either a dispensing organization or a cannabis dispensing organization, to be clear. Or I think a smoke shop can also apply if the municipality allows for it. And my understanding of the dispensing organization, because they are a cannabis dispensary, they can purchase the cannabis from the dispensary.
No, so my understanding is if this applies, it pretty much applies to dispensing and selling. When I read the code, the Illinois code in regards to this, it does not specify if consumption is allowed, but it allows for dispensing and selling of cannabis in these facilities that you mentioned.
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry. It says,
So the Illinois code, which is the cannabis consumption code under the Smoke-Free Act, it does have a provision within that code that allows for cannabis. But in that section, when you refer to the code, it refers to selling and dispensing. There was no mention of consumption of cannabis.
yeah, so section 35, you should look at exemptions. So it says, notwithstanding any other provision of this act, smoking is allowed in the following areas. And then it talks about cannabis dispensing organizations.
Right. So when you refer to the dispensing organizations, their requirement only pretty much states dispensing and selling. There's no mention of consumption there. So that's what I want to clarify. From my understanding, there's a difference between dispensing and consuming cannabis at the facilities.
Yeah, we can clarify that, but it's I'm pretty certain that smoke lounges are allowed at dispensing organizations as well as smoke shops as well. But we could provide that clarification between meetings. Council Harris, any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Councilmember Ravel.
Even though I may not vote for it, I guess we'd want to have the ordinance provide which zoning districts could have one of these establishments. We'd want it to be at least as restrictive as.
Yeah.
And you know.
My thought is that it would, sorry.
Mhm.
If Councilman Ravel can continue first.
Right, and I did do just a quick look online about what other states are doing in terms of these establishments, and some of them are bring your own, and some allow bring your own and some don't. So, you know, that would be, well, we'd obviously have to see what Illinois statute says, but you know, there are two approaches, and in some places they allow alcohol sales as well, food sales as well, and some don't. So there are a lot of details to be considered.
If I can say.
Yeah,
So, Councilmember
this is
Rivera,
Director
in-
Ogbo speaking.
yes, in terms of food, it will be disallowed at a cannabis consumption lounge. It can serve as a contaminant, and it is against our food code to allow food in the same vicinity as cannabis consumption.
So under this exemption that, oh, Councilmember Hadakatis.
And I just want to flag, I have my hand up.
Oh, okay, I'll have you, we'll go Councilmember Hadakatis, then Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, the information I'd want to hear is just about the air filtration and kind of the secondhand smoke. I think, there are places with cigar lounges that are probably more damaging potentially, and I know they have, mitigations around air quality. I'd be more concerned for the staff that work there, but that'd be kind of the information I'd like to see going forward.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I just want to highlight one to Councilmember Hadakatis's point there. For me, that is, one of the most important factors is the air filtration. And I understand that under the tobacco consumption lounges, that, that is regulated. And I think we'd want to mirror that fairly closely, or whatever the state law says generally on cannabis consumption lounges. Separately to Councilmember Ravel's point, and my apologies for interrupting, I certainly agree that this should be worked into our zoning code in some way, and likely that these consumption lounges would have to go through, I would imagine, in my view, some sort of, special use process or something similar. I do think that these should be highly regulated and should have to come before council or land use commission before being granted a right to operate here. And then lastly, I do think about, I wonder if the state code says this, because certainly there are infused, whether it be drinks or dishes. And, I also could imagine a cannabis consumption lounge where there's more than one way to ingest cannabis, and smoking it is not the only way to ingest it. And there are, some classy establishments that have, infused cannabis, THC into dining experiences. And so I'd wonder how that would fit in, and if, those would, that would be a cannabis consumption lounge as well, although it's not smoked, it's through an edible form. So I just love our ordinance to maybe consider that as well.
Councilmember Harris.
Have we spoken to legal, and officers just left, but have we spoken to legal about this and gotten their input?
Yeah, I don't think they have responded in writing to this, but I have discussed this with Council Cummings before. So we need,
I'm sorry.
It probably would be
police,
helpful
more
to
the
have
police,
a
more the
memo.
police than the legal.
oh, more than police.
Yeah, he left, and I don't
think I've reached out to so just to be clear too, so Councilmember Reed made the referral. I have been working to try to recruit dispensary organizations to Evanston, which was always a plan, both to just expand a new business type in Evanston, but also in light of the fact that all the revenue from it goes to support our reparations program, of course. And so as part of that, there was a lot of the new dispensary organizations who were only recently provided their conditional use licenses are interested in, yes, dispensing, but also taking advantage of the exemption that's in state code allowing for cannabis consumption lounges, which is kind of how I got involved on this issue. And then since then, I've been, in talks with our health department, with our, I think, buildings department, but not our police department yet. So we can add that
Please.
to the list, absolutely. Any other questions, Councilmember Harris?
Probably, but.
Anyone else? So I just wanted to keep flipping back and forth and losing my place. Where is it at? There it is. So I just wanted to be clear that the state does have an exemption for this, and I mentioned it earlier. the last piece of what they call I think their Smoke Free Act says an owner shall reasonably assure that smoking is prohibited in indoor public places and workplaces unless specifically exempted by Section 35 of this act. And then that's Section 35 goes on to say, notwithstanding any other provision of this act, smoking is allowed in the following areas. And then it talks about dispensing organizations as one of them. After that, it says Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act authorized or permitted by a unit, local government to allow on-site consumption of cannabis if the establishment maintains a specially designated area or areas for the purpose of heating, burning, smoking, or lighting cannabis. 2 is limited to individuals 21 or older. And 3 maintains a locked door or barrier to any specifically designated areas for the purpose of heating, burning, smoking, or lighting cannabis. And then as Councilman Reed, I believe, said earlier, there are it does also speak to filtration, as you said, Councilmember Hadikotis. So it's very clear in state statute that that they allow for indoor cannabis smoke lounges, and we'll have some more information at the next meeting.
Yes, please share that.
I will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, this is just for discussion, Councilmember
I
Harris.
told you maybe.
No, you good. You good.
So I do want us to just take our time with this. I'm very nervous about this. And I understand that, and I want us to also be very careful in associating it with reparations, because I think that has negative pushback, especially if this fails, or even if it goes forward and doesn't do well. So I just want to be careful that we don't marry the two strongly, and that we just take our time. I am not ready, even I know it's for discussion. I think we need to have a lot of discussion just about this topic.
Yeah, and to be clear, I was more so tying cannabis dispensing organizations to our reparations program, because in Evanston, we're probably we probably don't have the size of property that is gonna that gives me a reasonable expectation that we're going to attract craft grow organizations. So we're probably only going to attract infusers and dispensaries, dispensary license holders, and that's all. And it is just in the way we adopted the reparations ordinance. It is literally tied to it, to our ability to expand our cannabis businesses. And again, I think just with the type of real estate that we have available, we're really talking about infusers and dispensaries.
And if just want to note, I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Reed.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate you sharing, your hesitation, Councilmember Harris, because certainly we can have conversations. But I do want to highlight again, that this is, and I'd love if you feel comfortable, if you have it now, or if you just want to have an offline conversation about what some of those specific concerns are, I'd love to hear it, especially for staff to hear it as well. But so we can legislate around that. But, I really want us to think about this like a bar. It's not much different than, a place where folks are licensed to go to sell and consume alcohol. It would be cannabis. And certainly we know that, even there are studies, and I can provide some of this to staff, that show even the secondhand effects of alcohol can be just as bad. Obviously you're not inhaling alcohol or consuming it, but, the risk that someone intoxicated from alcohol poses to another person is even greater than that of someone who is a cannabis user. And so, I appreciate those concerns and want to hear more about them, but I want us to think about this kind of like a bar and understand that this is actually a safer version of a bar in many cases. Thank you.
I also just wanted to say I would love for us to consider of establishing the Evanston Health Advisory Council as a real city committee and council. I've seen Mr. Ziegler, I believe is his name, speaking on behalf of the council on 2 separate occasions, one about hookah lounges and now about cannabis lounges, which again, I'll speak for myself. I encourage as much kind of public and citizen participation as possible. That being so, because he's representing the Health Advisory Council, I think we have a good model for the way to solicit this type of input from our members of the community. And I think that's through having it be an official committee where there's an open application period where people can apply to sit on the committee. They have regular open meetings. We could have sent this issue to that Health Advisory Council in advance of this meeting and heard from them in that way as well. And then they could have made kind of an official recommendation. So I'll work with Mayor Biss in figuring out how to do that, but I would love, and I would love Mr. Ziegler to participate on that official kind of city committee, but I do think it should be official. Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I guess I just have to say I disagree. I think this council is a very different kind of group compared to our regular boards and commissions. And I think I don't know who else is on it besides Mr. Ziegler, but I imagine the people are there because of their professional expertise and their role in other public health organizations, or maybe
absolutely.
Director Ogbo can comment.
We have a variation of individuals who are on the council. We have doctors, medical doctors. We have the department's medical consultant. We have social workers. We have public health professionals. So these are people who are experts in their fields. And whenever it pertains to a matter of health, we relay such matters to the council in order to get their input and recommendations on those matters. And they've been with the city as long as I've been with the city. I've been with the city for a number of years, and they've been able to advance health and provide input on a varied amount of subjects relating to health. And as I mentioned, they were very instrumental in Tobacco 21 when we increased the age from 18 to 21. That's one of what they worked on. Also, when we had the federally qualified health center, Erie, they were very instrumental in getting Erie here to the city. As most of us will remember, the department was quite decimated when it came to our clinical services, and people really didn't have anywhere to go to at that point. So they took it upon themselves to approach various stakeholders to bring Erie Health Center to the community. So they are very instrumental. They have done quite a lot in our community. So
Yeah, I just want to be clear that Councilman Reed.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say, I don't want us to get too lost in the conversation about the committee. Maybe we can come back and put that on an agenda and discuss that at some point. And I just don't want these two issues to get too jumbled and maybe too tied together. Certainly, just to the concerns that I'm hearing raised, I think we should follow the best research and science on this stuff. So we talked about this commission or committee or advisory council group supporting moving the smoking age up to 21. Again, we know that with cannabis consumption, that the brain isn't fully developed until around age 25, and there's a lot of research that says it's best to start consuming cannabis after 25. So if we want to say you got to be 25 or older to go to the consumption lounges, I'm fine with that. I think we should follow the science. I think we should come back with a well-crafted ordinance that allows for these consumption lounges, allows for dispensaries to have the flexibility that they need to be profitable here in the city of Evanston, and expand the revenues that we have for the important efforts that we're working on.
Yeah, and I was just to wrap on what I was saying is, and before we get this on the future agenda, I'll work with Councilman Hedikotis on this. I don't think we have such a council that weighs in on policy in the way it seems like this group is, as that isn't an official city committee with open meetings and agendas, so people can kind of follow their deliberation as they're coming to conclusions about how they plan to weigh in on these policy decisions, which is what concerns me. It's not the people at all. I think it probably is a great group. I'd love to even know who is on it.
absolutely.
Would be even a first start, even if there wasn't enough support to make it an official committee, although I think there will be. I'll make a strong case for it. But even if there wasn't, just a public list of who is on the committee, I think is just best practice. And again, I don't think we have another committee that weighs in on policy in this way that is not an official city committee, and certainly not one that is not named at all on any city website. The last thing I'll say is if they were only weighing in on administrative issues, that would be one thing. Like this is a kind of a body that helps to counsel me on administrative decisions. Once they step into our realm, then it's like, I want to know who they are for sure, but also I think it's more appropriate if it's an official city committee.
Right.
Director Ogbo.
And I forgot to mention, this current E-Plan, they were very instrumental. They provided input, commentary, guidance in our E-Plan. Not only this, even in the previous E-Plan as well. So you can see that their stance in our matters is very vital. So
Yeah, and I appreciate all the input. Okay, so we're moving on. This is just for discussion. It does not require any action, so we'll move on to HS2. Actually, before we move on, Director Ogbo, I want to make sure that have you received enough direction from us as to what we would like to see when this comes back, or the information that we need?
well, my understanding is that we want a well-crafted, executed ordinance. We'll have to look at various ordinances across departments that debar cannabis consumption. Our Clean Air Act debars it. It is explicitly stated in our ordinance. I believe there's a zoning code that also prevents cannabis consumption. So there has to be a number of specifications in order for this to be a well-crafted ordinance. And of course, we'll seek our law department guidance on this as well, especially as it pertains to the codes, the Illinois code specifically about cannabis consumption. For me, reading it, it's a bit unclear whether that means dispensing or selling. When you read the Cannabis Tax Act, I believe, it refers to selling and dispensing. It didn't make any reference to consumption. So those are things that we will have to clarify. And from a health perspective, I know this is something that we want to see come to fruition, but we also have to look at the health impacts. Some of the ingredients or substances that we have in cigarette smoke also is in cannabis. I also understand that this is a positive way of us funding reparations fund, but we also have to look at what those negative impacts can be.
So I'll make sure because what I read from was from the state statute. So which clearly talks about consumption lounges. So I'll forward that to you and Corporation Counsel Cummings. But I also don't want to miss what Councilmember Harris requested. Just if you could check in with our law department, our police department, to have them weigh in. And I feel like there were several others, but if other communities was one of them. Yep. And if anybody else, any other members can just provide that in writing through email, I think that'll be helpful. I want to make sure that you have everything you need before the next meeting. Okay, so we'll move on to item HS2. Can I have a motion, please?
I will move item HS2, amending City Code 729B1, 4th of July Parkway, 4th of July Parade Parkway regulations.
Second.
It's been
Thank
properly
you.
moved and seconded. We'll start off with Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I'll open this up. The goal here is just to make sure that our parade provisions are clear for all parades. Is Council Cummings in the room?
No, we have,
No. Okay. Do we have Corporation Counsel in the room?
yes.
Yes,
Okay. I'm sorry. Who is the counsel there? I'm unable to see.
Johnson, Council Johnson.
Oh, Mr. Johnson. Okay. Yes. So what we see here is this ordinance specifically regulates for the 4th of July parade. And even if you look at the memo that the legal department provided, and Ms. Johnson, please correct me if I'm, saying something wrong, but, potentially if, let's say, the the Juneteenth parade were to want to, they were to get a parade license and they wanted to occupy the parkway in a similar manner that the 4th of July parade is allowed to occupy the parkway. But, of course, this would be done on a different street. They use a different parade route, different date, different time. It seems as though we may have an issue of equity, that could potentially be a legal issue if we were to grant one set of regulations for the 4th of July parade, but not allow those set of regulations for other duly authorized parades. And so I think it just makes sense that we either amend this to just have the language reflect parades, period. And, wherever the parade happens, you can occupy the parkway for a reasonable amount of time. I think even the way this ordinance is written, being able to occupy the parkway from as early as July 1st all the way to July 4th seems a bit excessive. Maybe it's a 24-hour period, or maybe at most a 48-hour period. I think, 24 hours is likely good enough that you set your stuff out. And I think we can make this regulation, as I said, equitable across the board. It's all in there.
Okay, anyone else? Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I agree that we want to provide the same accommodations, or whatever the word would be, for any of our other parades. Yeah, I haven't really figured out what it is that we could either say that's part of the special use that any organization, including the 4th of July Association, needs to go through. So when they submit their special use permit application for their parade, they also apply for a parkway accommodation or something. And we could leave it super general like that or we could, I guess if we start adding, yeah, I don't know whether a one size fits all is gonna work. So, if we have
Personally, what you just described, I think makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, because I talked to Councilman Reed before the meeting, and that's, I think, where we landed as well.
Okay, because some parades might need, there might be more need for more hours of preparation, parkway accommodation than others, or it could evolve too. I mean, the Juneteenth parade could grow to need 4 days of reserving parkway space. I don't know. So
Yeah. Any other comments, questions?
So then would we be recommending, we'd have to amend
Yeah.
our,
So because I was not able to look at, was there an ordinance provided around for us today? Is there an ordinance in the packet? So what is the current
I don't
ordinance?
believe.
Yeah, there's one. Yeah.
Director Ovo, are you able to describe what is in our packet for today?
Yes, absolutely. We have the memo, and there is an attached ordinance specifically to the topic being discussed. And in the memo, it does provide statements that what is provided in our ordinance is not constitutional. As Councilmember Reed mentioned, that there's an equity issue if we only have one parade for a particular section in Evanston. What about the other sections in Evanston? But it appears based on, and our law department can weigh in, based on the analysis, that it's not unconstitutional.
Yeah,
based on this.
I'll go there with it. I'm more so saying the ordinance that's in our packet, does it make any of the changes that we've discussed today or no?
There isn't, no.
Okay.
There's
All right,
not
that's
an
good.
ordinance that reflects the changes.
Councilmember Hadikatis.
Kind of building off of what Council Member Ravel said, maybe because we already have the ordinance specifically for the 4th of July Parkway regulations. And I have no idea how many special use we have for parades, but I do like the idea of having the option to have them apply for a parkway. I don't know, parkway regulation. And then I think it would just be a matter of then adding the similar language to the ordinance before the event happens. I think it'd be awfully hard to do a generalized, because this is like historically, I don't know how long this has been on the books, but this has obviously come after years of experience. So I think if we have some sort of addition to the special use permit for our parades, we can kind of fold the newer parades into the parkway regulation, if that's, if people are amenable to that.
Yeah, and I'm not even convinced at this point, and I'll talk more about this during my time, if we even need an ordinance for the 4th of July parade. I think even the 4th of July parade could just go through that, whatever this new process is we create. I don't know why it was ever added to the ordinance.
I think it was added because people were putting their chairs out days and days ahead.
Okay, that's
And
why,
so it
yeah.
was to try to contain
To
it.
try to contain it, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can add that to whatever the new thing we create too. Councilmember Harris.
I was going to say the same thing. There must have been an issue for it to become an ordinance. So we need to pay attention to that. And while I'm not against changing the ordinance or creating something where you have to request this, there had to have been some precedents that made it necessary to have this. So we need to always pay attention to our historical perspective on why we ended up where we were.
Just want to flag, I have my hand up.
Councilman Reed.
Thank you. Yes, and I appreciate both Councilmember Ravel's recounting of where this came from, and Councilmember Harris and Hadikatis' concern for the background in this. And I agree, we need to make sure that we account for the history of this. And as Councilmember Ravel said, we're trying to regulate, similar to folks in Chicago with the dibs system. We're trying to regulate, folks calling dibs on a spot for the 4th of July parade. And I think, we can achieve that still with allowing for the same regulations and equity for whether it be the Juneteenth parade or, the Mother's Day parade or whatever parades we choose to have here in Evanston in the future, that we allow those same regulations for those parades. And so to me, as Councilmember Burns said, I think the easiest way to regulate this is to either eliminate the 4th of July specific provision or make some tweaks to it to make it, parade parkway provisions in line with where Councilmember Hadikatis was going, and, make that more general, eliminate the reference to the specific streets and the specific days, and give an allowance of, 24, 48 hours for folks, with the request of the parkway occupation permit, that, folks can set out their lawn chairs or blankets or whatever else, 48 hours advance of the parade.
So to move this along, does anybody disagree? Oh, Dave.
Good evening, Deputy City Manager Dave Stoneback. I'm only concerned with the discussion about trying to tie this to the parade permit, because the organizer of the parade won't know what public wants to use the parkway. So this is in the code. It's not like the organizer of the 4th of July parade is not the person taking up the spaces along the parkway. It's the community members. So I could see where you might want to change the code to say for any parade on any route, setting out or dedicating areas, roping off areas is prohibited until a certain amount of time before. But I don't think it can be tied to the permit because the person obtaining the permit is not the person occupying the parkway. That's what I want.
Yeah, I think that my mind, the way I saw it is just anytime somebody wants to do a parade, it is allowed within a certain window. Just to keep it simple, we could complicate it and say that, the parade, the people doing the parade need to request it. I think it just should be allowed in a certain window. We know there's a parade coming down. We know Juneteenth is coming down Dodge on this day. People are allowed to start setting up chairs starting on this day until this day, and just keep it simple.
Yeah, and I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think it gets tied to the permit to have the parade. It gets just any time there's a parade that's
Exactly.
authorized, you
Right.
can't occupy the parkway until a certain amount of time before along that route. So that was.
I'm happy with that. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Is everybody else satisfied with that? Yes, okay. You have enough direction, Director Obo? Wonderful. Wait, so this was also for discussion. So yeah, we were just providing some direction. I think we have done that. And so we move on to item HS3. If I can get a motion.
I move that we discuss the No Mo May recommendations from the Environment Board.
Second,
Been properly moved by Councilmember Ravel and seconded by Councilmember Harris. Any discussion on this? Deputy Manager Stoneback, did you want to kick us off with some context, or should we go?
And we have
Remember-
Wendy Pollock from the Environment Board is, I believe, available to provide some background too.
Ms. Pollock, are you on the call?
Yes, I am
Okay, yeah.
on
if you
Zoom.
would-
Mhm.
If you wouldn't mind leading us on this with an intro.
Let's see. Well, Councilmember Ravel, did you want to give a little context first about the request for the?
Councilmember Ravel.
Right, yeah, so I made the referral roughly a year ago, because there was a lot of media coverage and encouragement of people to not mow their lawns in the early spring to allow dandelions, et cetera, to nurture our bees and butterflies. And so the question was, should we try to promote a no mow May here in Evanston? And so I made the referral, I sent it, it went to the Environment Board to weigh in on the pros and cons of our doing that. And then we have this very detailed and helpful memo from the Environment Board and with some recommendations for us. And I'll just say initially that I think the recommendations are really to be supported. So maybe Wendy would like to say a few words. And we also have Stephen Walker available, I believe, to talk about, because some of the recommendations are for city staff.
Okay, yeah, if you could walk us through the recommendations or at least a summary of it, Ms. Pollock.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So we divided them into recommendations for the council and recommendations for the staff. And we did respond to the specific question about No Mow May, which has been adopted in some other communities as a community-wide initiative. We suggested that this is, we did not recommend that Evanston do this, but we did feel that letting people who are participating in it, which there were a number this spring, letting them do it and not penalizing them might be one way to go. Just as context, we clearly, as part of our pushing for the full implementation of the Climate Action Plan, we support efforts of all kinds to encourage sustainable landscape management and natural plants. We just don't think that not mowing your lawn is necessarily the best way to make people more positive about that. It's not the best advertisement from some people's point of view for naturalized landscaping. So, but we do feel, on the other hand, that any opportunity there is to promote ecological landscape management or sustainable landscape management, more extensive use of native plants rather than lawns, which take a lot of resources to maintain and aren't terribly good for pollinators. We do recommend that every opportunity be taken to promote that and allow it. So let's see. And as far as the staff is concerned, and I do want to acknowledge that Stephen Walker, the whole forestry and greenways staffs have been extremely supportive. I work in the Lat Arboretum, where we've been gradually replacing turf grass and very hard damaged soil with lots of varied native plants, and the city staff has been, nothing but helpful and supportive and collaborative. And that's an example of what we're talking about, that we hope that kind of land management can be extended to more spaces around the community. People really seem to enjoy it. The birds enjoy it. And the young woman, I think this is very telling. A woman in her senior year at ETHS said to me recently, when I told her what we'd been doing there, she'd walked through there her whole school life, after school, and she lit up and she said, "Oh, it seems as if the Arboretum's been getting bigger over the last couple of years." So I think, her perception was that it was more interesting to walk through, more refreshing. And so from the human point of view and the mental health point of view, we also recommend it. So maybe I'll just leave it at that. Maybe this one other recommendation, which had to do with buckthorn, is kind of a technicality, but part of natural landscape management is planting. Part of it is keeping invasive plants from taking over. And so that's one reason you hear a lot about buckthorn removal in this context. And so we did have a very concrete suggestion about adding buckthorn to the weed ordinance list of weeds, so that it would encourage people to remove it. So other than that, the committee, the board, and the stewards are all ready to help with public education. And I just grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pollack. I appreciate that. So for city staff, I just wanted to read out the first recommendation. It says, we recommend that the city suspend enforcement of the city's weed ordinance, city code section 8.5 in April and the first 2 weeks of May, to allow for some lawns to temporarily exceed 8 inches in height. This suspension should be accompanied by public education about better alternatives. I'll start there. And so Deputy Manager Stoneback, what is the city's kind of position on that first recommendation? Or city staff?
Good evening again. I agree that we should allow to do this, and I think that Councilmember Revelle had an excellent suggestion within a referral that we set up a system where they call 311, indicate that they want to participate with this program at their house. The city would then say, we'll come to this location and pick up a yard sign so that they could put the yard sign in at their home. And then the city would not enforce the weed regulation about the height of the grass until whatever date the city council selects that that would end. This recommends the second week in May. Some recommend all through May. So that would have to be something that would have to be decided upon. Then we could have a code modification to allow the variance that community members that have the yard sign in their home and are registered would not be penalized under this weed code. So staff is fine with that suggestion if that's how the city council would like us to move forward with.
Councilman Revelle.
Right. That makes it sound like the city is in fact really endorsing a no mow May program. I guess my question to staff is, can we just simply determine not to enforce the weed ordinance for those weeks, and instead promote education about a true way to provide the habitat that our pollinators need?
I don't think it's appropriate for staff to turn a blind eye on our city code. So if we do it for this, then people would say, well, why don't you do it for that? And so the code could be modified perhaps that we don't enforce the height of the grass until the second week of, till May 15th or something like that.
Okay.
So my preference would be is that there is a code modification so that staff
Right.
doesn't have that discretion.
No.
I preferred the policy where we use a yard sign to know who's participating and who's not. So if we really have an issue with somebody's letting it go because they aren't mowing or need financial assistance, that we could identify that easier. but that's up to
Right, yeah,
the city
just
council.
once we get into giving people signs to put in their yards, it sounds pretty much like an official program. But so I guess the suggestion that we modify our ordinance to say that the weed ordinance won't be enforced until May 15th or something.
Okay, we could look at that and then
Okay,
come
because
back.
I believe it was Glencoe that was doing, that didn't, their no-mow program was like, not the whole month of May, as I recall, so. And then, and I've been asking Wendy whether she and her colleagues would be available to help provide some educational information that we could provide to our residents to promote this alternative to just not mowing your front lawn.
And I believe that we already do some of that through the Parks and Recreation Division, through the Ecology Center. I know that we had in our storm water control, we encourage people to put in rain gardens and have on our website a whole list of types of vegetation that you could plant. We worked with Nature's Perspective, I'm going to say several years ago now, to try to promote that, and they were giving discount prices for people that want to participate in that. So we can try to put this in the news more through city press releases about that as well. But we already have resources on that, and that we can try to advertise a little more frequently going into the spring.
And just so I'm clear, Councilman Ravel, your point is your suggestion would be a situation where everyone is automatically opted into the program by not enforcing during those times, as
Yeah.
opposed to having someone call in to say, hey, I want to participate, and then they get whether they get the yard sign or not, they have to call in to say they're participating in order to not be penalized by our
Right,
property standards.
yeah, that
division.
basically, because that way it doesn't suggest to our residents that we're really promoting not mowing their lawn. What we're promoting is these other types of ways to have a more natural garden that truly does a much better job of supporting our pollinators.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Harris.
If I just want to note that I've got my hand up. It's been up for a while.
Okay, let's go Councilmember Harris, then Councilmember Reed, and then Councilmember Hedekaitis.
Just wanted to say that I appreciated the recommendations by staff. I think it makes sense. I want us to be careful with, we won't do it here and there, because then that becomes discriminatory on who's telling on who. And with the signs, then it is an intentional program where we're saying this is what it is and people don't get lazy. So I did like the memo that the staff created, and I think it makes the most sense. I get the opting. We don't want to make it a program, but we want to be intentional about the work that we do and that people understand this is an intentional set of circumstances happening right here, not just, oh, he's not mowing and they're not mowing, so I'm not going to mow. So I liked it. Thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I appreciate this referral. I remember around that time, Councilmember Kelly and I think on APW were pushing to hold off on mowing the city's property, and Director Stonebeck highlighted the headache that could come from that. And so I understand some of the provisions to leave the city out of it in some regard. I do wonder what the concerns are regarding, the optics of the city condoning this. And I think maybe we should move away from, the term no mow May is really easy to remember, and it's nice, it's catchy, but really, I think what we're really talking about here is natural landscapes, and maybe we should move away from the no mow May and we should encourage people to create lawns that they don't have to mow either in May or June or ever, because they're creating these more natural landscapes. And so I wonder how we can craft this in a way that we can with full measure and with a full-throated measure, support this and say, yes, this is something the city condones. We want you to do X, Y, Z. And if you do X, Y, Z, you will not get a ticket for not, mowing your lawn. And so maybe X, Y, Z is you have, a certain percentage of your lawn is covered with, natural planting. And I'm just spouting stuff off. I think the folks that are much smarter on this subject than I am, Wendy and the team and others, can come up with some kind of some formula or whatever to say that if you're doing this, you will not be required to mow. And it's something that we can, staff can easily verify, and whether it's a lawn sign or whatever it is that goes out in front of your house once you do that, it's something that we're encouraging. And so I'd just love for us to maybe look into that and move. It already seems like we're doing it, so maybe let's just say it, that that's what we're doing, and move more aggressively toward that.
Councilmember Hadikotis.
Yeah, I just want to highlight, I've talked to Public Works staff, and they're actually working on a strategic green spaces plan. And, they have a lot of challenges because, there's a lot of sporting events happen in our parks. And yet there's places where people want to see more native habitat and native plantings. They are working on a plan at what to do with the native plantings, and I've had some really good conversations with the arborists and the staff there. And as someone who participated in No Mow May, I do think it's probably, if you actually don't mow all through May, your lawn does look a little bit ragged. I do like the idea of maybe cutting it off at halfway through May, but that's something that I think we will probably see more naturalization in our public green spaces, but and I know they're being very thoughtful as to where to do that. So just wanted to add that.
And on that matter, we have engaged with the consultant on that. We are just really at the kickoff on that and setting up the schedule for when we will determining what all groups we want to meet with, and obviously the Environment Board and Wendy would be people that we would plan to meet with. Ultimately, the Parks and Rec Department, or I'm sorry, the Parks and Rec Board would be the board that we will seek approval of before we bring it to the City Council. But we do want to get the thoughts and comments from all the other commissions and boards that have some tie to this. So definitely we will be meeting and giving the Environment Board some comments and opportunity to talk about the natural areas that we're looking forward to.
Any other comments, questions?
So I'm not sure where we're ending up. Are we asking staff to draft an amendment to our weed ordinance that?
So I did have a few things that I think will help. So one, I think is it kind of this auto opt-in or this self-initiated opt-in is an important question we need to answer. It seems like Councilmember Harris, you were the self-initiated, that someone actually should have to, to reach out and opt into the program. I think Councilmember Reed, it seems like he was there as well. Councilmember Ravel, seems like you wanted the auto opt-in, and I don't know if we heard from Councilmember Hadikotis about that, but I feel like that's an important component to this, that we could either, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to make sure that would be helpful to staff, because there's an auto opt-in where everybody is opted in, and then you just don't enforce the weed ordinance during that time, and that's it. Or there's, no, we're still enforcing except for people who have opted in, and, we can talk about the yard sign, but at the very least, they've opted into the program.
Well, thank you for
Chair,
clarifying.
I'd like to throw out a third option as well.
Councilmember Reed, before we go there, I just want to make sure, would that be helpful, though?
Absolutely
Okay.
would be helpful.
Okay, so Councilmember Reed, if you want to provide a third option.
Yeah, to me, the third option, and maybe this is just a separate referral that I'm happy to make, but, I think what I'm hearing here is that what we really aren't really looking to move toward a No Mow May. we're looking to move towards something more thoughtful. And it seems like that more thoughtful approach is to, instead of encouraging folks to not maintain their properties during the month of May or even for the first 2 weeks of May, we would like to encourage folks to maintain their properties in an alternative fashion that is that includes more native plantings and a more natural landscape. And that's what I think we seem to be really wanting to move toward.
So we already allow for that, correct?
Yes, we do.
And then, so what are the rules that we've established to,
Anybody can convert, I don't think it's a requirement that you have to have a turf grass lawn. Anybody can put in the flowers in the gardens that they want on their own property at any time. Don't quote me on this, but I don't think you need a permit to do that either. So you can have a garden with flowers and in a natural area that is permissible without a permit, as far as I understand. I think what Councilmember Revelle said.
Can your yard be occupied, with
That's what I was gonna-
this
Can you-
natural?
can your yard be occupied, but also if somebody maintains, they let it grow beyond 8 inches, but it's maintained, it's still occupying the whole yard, but it's maintained in a way that's aesthetically pleasing, whatever, is that allowed currently? Or is it just certain types of flowers
I'm
that are
going to
allowed?
defer to Director Obo.
As someone who used to manage property maintenance, irrespective of how artistically pleasing your garden is or your property is, if it's above 8 inches, that violates the code. So in that regard, if we're responding to a complaint, even though it looks well manicured, it looks well, but if it's 8 inches above, it is a violation of the code.
Okay, no
I'm
matter
going to
the
note
plant
that Ms.
species.
Pollock is,
Okay.
seems
And,
like she.
and so we,
Yeah,
Those
Ms.
are-
Pollock is great.
Those that are categorized as weeds, right? So if it's categorized as weeds, if it's 8 inches and above, it's a violation of the property maintenance code.
but if it's not categorized as a weed, it could be taller than 8 inches and occupy the entire yard.
I believe there is a permit that someone actually has to get. I think that's through.
Isn't it
Public
just the
Works, yeah.
parkway where people have
Right.
to get the permits?
Right, yeah, during the parkway,
That's-
yes, absolutely.
Right.
That's true.
And that's what I was saying, on their own property. It becomes somewhat of a challenge if they want to do it in the parkway, and then a permit is required. And then there's also concerns with sightline. If you're by a corner, we don't want you to grow something that's going to be too tall that would prohibit the sightline of a car coming through an intersection or something like that. So we were unsuccessful in trying to revise an ordinance, but there is an existing ordinance that already has a lot of those requirements in there. We were trying to make it clear. We were unsuccessful on a previous attempt to do that. But yes, I still don't know where the city council, I
Right.
agree we want to promote,
Right, how can we promote Councilmember Reed's third alternative? That's
And-
what we
and-
really want.
And he raised some questions that I had, but really, I think no matter what, we're really down to two options, because the point being that no matter what we choose, it's still, is it self-initiated, is it auto opt-in? So I think I'm still back at the same place, even if the program ends up being
I think
a
either
natural
option-
landscape.
Right. We encourage natural landscapes regardless of whether we decide to allow people to let their turf lawn grow until the second week of May or whatever it is. And how do we allow them to do that? I think that's the question that you originally asked, and I'm not sure that I have an answer for yet.
Correct, yeah, because what if, Councilman Reed, someone does not want, they want to participate in the program as we're discussing it today, but they don't necessarily want to, the natural landscape thing and to have to manage and maintain that. I think we'll probably still have people that want to participate in a no-mow or low-mow May. And so the question still remains, do they need to opt into that, or are they auto opted in? Councilmember Hedekatis, and then I want to revisit this question.
Yeah, I think Dave touched on the parkway planting. As someone who has kind of a naturalized lawn myself, I've applied for the permit. It's pretty straightforward as far as like the sight lines and its, size of the plantings. As much as we'd like to encourage it, it is really hard to give people direction because every yard is different. And it's really hard to say like, just do this because it's not going to work on all the different landscapes with the soil types and shade and sun coverage. So they're like, there's a million moving parts in this. I don't know, I don't know if I want to throw this out, like if an outside organization maybe can provide the signs and not, so that maybe we're not implicitly, officially saying this is in City of Evanston, no mo sign. That's another possibility. I'd be okay personally with either option, either the opt-in or the implicit opt-in. So if we're looking for direction, I could go either way.
And trust me, I'll get you your direction. We're going to ultimately have to call, I think, a question on this particular issue. But before that, Councilman Hadakatis, did you apply for the parkway or for your yard? I just want to be clear.
For the parkway.
For the
The
parkway,
yard, you
okay.
can do kind of whatever you want.
For the yard, you can do whatever you want.
Within reason,
Okay.
like there are certain like weed ordinance, like you can't just if you let your yard go, it will grow, all sorts of things are gonna grow there. Also, just wanna throw it out, weeds, wildflowers, depends who you ask, so.
That's why I said
Yeah,
that.
it's kind of,
'cause
it's
I
kind
think
of
there's a
hard.
way you can, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I think,
And you're breaking up a little bit.
I think a universal. Oh, am I able to be heard now?
I can hear you now,
Signal's
yeah.
full. Yes, okay. I think it makes sense for a universal option. And so maybe this is a minor tweak to our code that, that before, May 15th or whatever date we go with, that your grass may not exceed a height of, 16 inches or whatever it is. I'm just throwing some random number out there, but, that way we make it so people can go part of May without mowing. We increase the number of inches that folks are allowed to let their lawn go to prior to, May 15th or whatever date we choose. And that's the way that we allow essentially everyone to universally opt in to this. And then we can allow CGE or some other group on the outside to promote the fact that folks are actually participating in the no mow May. But with that, I will say that I still maintain, I think our real goal isn't for folks not to maintain their yards. Our real goal is for folks to maintain their yards in a more environmentally and ecologically friendly manner. And so maybe, again, we should start looking away from the no mow May to, something that's not as catchy as that.
And I think the argument is that by not mowing, you're achieving that. And I think one of the ways that I think I heard Councilman Ravel describe earlier is by providing bees, the dandelions and other plant species to pollinate. And so I think that's the argument, is that by not mowing, that is a more ecologically friendly way to.
The argument for not mowing, for no mow May, is to, the dandelions and those early spring plants do provide some food for pollinators, but in fact, and that's apparently true in England, but not so true in the US, where, so it gives people a false sense of comfort that they're doing something for pollinators by just not mowing their lawn, when in fact they're only doing a little bit better than mowing their lawn.
But still, that's what we're
But
calling for with the no mow May, right?
We're really calling for them to do way more than just not mowing their lawn is the problem. Yeah.
I guess we got to figure out that part, because there's not mowing, which helps to a small degree, but it helps.
A little bit.
But then there's also, there's the concern about how neighbors will kind of,
Right.
how they will accept, whether or not they'll accept it
Well,
or not.
yeah, I
But then that's more so about like manicure and management of your yard, which is different than what
Yeah.
is
I mean, a number of residents did not mow their lawns
Mhm.
last May, and I don't believe we had any complaints.
yeah.
So,
So Councilmember Reed, to go back to your point, it sounds like you're now in the opt-in or the auto opt-in. Okay, so
Yeah,
can
I'm in the auto opt. Yeah.
can someone please make a motion on this?
Well, there's
Just so-
no, this is for discussion.
Is this just discussion?
To be
well,
clear.
well, I
Okay.
think we're
Yes.
giving direction.
giving
to
We do need
staff
direction.
to
I mean,
act.
I would, if we're allowed, Councilor Johnson, I would like to make a motion on this. I think Councilman Reed, I've heard you even say in the past that we need to start.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I'm fine. So I'll, I wish I was in the room and I could look around at faces, so maybe I'm not the best to make this motion, but I will move, regardless, that we amend our code to, I'll actually let someone in the room make it, because I really think we need to put a bit more time into this and move toward, trying to encourage even more the natural landscaping. So I'll let Councilmember Ravel, since
Yes,
this
you
is
can just
her
make a
referral, kind of
simple-
lead the direction.
Right. Well,
auto opt-in
yeah,
motion.
since I don't have the existing weed ordinance in front of me, I guess I would just ask staff to develop an ordinance, or an amendment to our, I guess, weed ordinance that allows people to not mow their lawn until May 15th.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
And then we can have a discussion, because I see Councilmember Harris seems like she might have some questions.
Okay. And this is basically.
And it doesn't mean it doesn't mean you have to grow it out to,
Right.
yeah.
Is what I said, is that enough of a direction? Yes, okay.
I feel like microphones aren't on in
Yeah,
the room.
sorry, if
or
you could,
folks just aren't talking.
Yeah, I was just having a side talk. So I was just saying, the group that asked for it is now kind of pulling back on it. So I'm just trying to be clear on what we're doing before I make a vote.
Why do you say they're pulling back?
No, I mean, what the Environment Board recommended was that we not officially sponsor No Mow May, that we allow residents who want to have a No Mow May lawn are allowed to do that.
Yeah, they said we recommend that the city suspend enforcement of the city's weed ordinance. And then I think
So
they
we're
said,
saying we're not suspending it because we don't want to send the message of, we suspend it. It gets into enforcement problems. So what we're saying is we're going to potentially amend our weed ordinance to allow people to let their weeds grow until May 15th.
And point of information for Council Johnson, and for the whole group, I've seen other communities with other issues far less important than overgrown lawn citations, pass resolutions that say, hey, whether it's law, the traditional law enforcement or other city staff law enforcement, such as property standards, to say, hey, we would like this, for in this case, the weed ordinance to be your lowest enforcement priority prior to May 15th or whatever. Instead of changing the ordinance, could we, Council Johnson passed a resolution that said, hey, our lowest priority for enforcement, making with the weed ordinance our lowest priority for property standards enforcement prior to a certain date.
I'm not sure that one would have the effect that you want, and two would be fair to ask of our code enforcement officers, because depending on what they are addressing at the time, lowest priority begins to look different, depending on what day of the week it is, depending on the month, depending on a whole set of circumstances. So I think that there's definitely room to accomplish what it is that you're trying to accomplish, perhaps by being a little bit more creative. So perhaps in the ordinance, we make a carve out for certain weeks of May. And so that way it does not change the ordinance indefinitely. It just changes the ordinance for a certain period of time. So there's ways to accomplish what it is that you want to accomplish. But I don't think making it something so subjective is fair to staff.
Or potentially to community members, because I see people are gonna, a lot of these complaints are driven by citizen complaints or community member complaints. And they expect enforcement, you know, and not for it to be a low priority, but for it to be enforced in the way the rest of the code is. So I think just a hard and fast, you know, we're allowing it, or whatever we're gonna call it during these periods is probably a better way to go. There is something on the table. It's been probably moved and seconded. We're in discussion of that now. I just wanted to remind everybody and going to call the question. If there are no other comments or questions, are we good? Councilmember Ravel?
I mean, for the whole item, because we do have Stephen Walker, I believe, still on the Zoom, who could address.
Not for the whole, just your motion, the motion you made.
Fine,
Yep.
fine, okay.
I was just going to say, if you wouldn't mind restating can you restate your motion, just so everybody is
That,
clear before we vote?
We asked staff to draft an amendment to our weed ordinance that would allow residents to not mow their lawn through May 15th.
If everybody is clear on the restated motion, we'll call the question.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Did you call me? You did? Did I say aye? Don't tell anybody about that. Okay, so that's done, and then now, so I guess that is it's not even really an amendment
Right.
because we didn't have any ordinance or anything to vote
No,
on. So we're good.
So the memo made some, talked about recommendations to staff that
ci-
talked about reducing mowing frequency and leaving low mow and no mow areas in our green spaces. And
Yep.
so I was just interested, and I asked Stephen Walker if he would be available just to say sort of what staff, where is staff in terms of these kinds of
Yeah, so if Mr. Walker is available, I'll just read through this for everybody here, but also if any community members are watching. So there were recommendations, the Environment Board provided recommendations to city staff and then recommendations to the city. One was reduce mowing frequency in July and August when growth slows. Crews might alternate mowing with mulching and watering trees. Number 2, expand low mow and no mow green zones. Number 3, eradicate buckthorn, Asian honeysuckle, and other non-native invasive plants on public lands. Landscape management, including as possible, creating and posting signage for use on public land. An example is in the Lorraine Morton Civic Center, Habitat Garden. And then the last one is include representatives of the Environment Board and natural area stewards in development of the recently commissioned Parks and Green Space Strategic Plan. So Mr. Walker, if you're with us, if you could provide any comments on those recommendations. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, this is definitely something that staff can look into. We currently do something very similar to all of these recommendations. But as Deputy City Manager Stoneback mentioned, I would definitely like to wait for the consulting to get completed before we make any other decisions. But I am completely and open to working with Ms. Pollack to work on any of those recommendations to move forward.
So, and I had discussions with Supervisor Walker previously that we already are reducing our mowing in July and August. If the grass is not growing, we're not out there cutting it, and we do have a long list of projects that we want to get to, including mulching and watering trees. So we do expand that in those months. We are still working on the low mow and no mow grass zones. We are not very satisfied with what was put out Robert Crown, and so we're still trying to figure that out and find the right materials to move forward with that. But where we would place those, again, would be a result of the study that's currently moving, and we don't think we'll have the end of that study, the final report on that study, until the end of the year, more or less. So this would be something that we would look to more to address in 2024. Eradicating the buckthorn and Asian honeysuckle is a challenge. For where that is mostly grown is along the North Shore Canal, and particularly along the banks on the North Shore Canal. So to remove that is one thing, but you have to replace it right away as well to prevent erosion. And we feel that that would be a very expensive endeavor for the city to undertake. Based on the amount of buckthorn that's out there, it could be millions of dollars. And where the buckthorn is invasive and dominating the tree species in that particular area, it's not a problem that's dominating the tree species throughout the city of Evanston. And so if we add it as a weed in our ordinance, and then there's an expectation that the city remove all these weeds on public property, that could be a very expensive endeavor to try to undertake. So if that's what the desire of the city council is, that's what we will do. Just realize that there is a significant dollar amount associated with removing the buckthorn and replacing it with new vegetation that would stabilize the canal bank and prevent it from eroding. So that is one consideration. If we want to make it something that we only do on private property, that wouldn't be equitable, and it would be a challenge, I think, to try to enforce. You can't have this buckthorn on your own property, but the city's allowing it over here. So again, anything can be done. It's just we want to caution you about the cost of this proposed code modification, because it is along the canal bank. It would be expensive to remove because of the steepness of the canal bank and the safety issues that you would have to employ, and then putting new plant material back down there to stabilize the bank is our concern, and we feel it could be millions of dollars to try to undertake that program. So we might want to start experimentally doing it in one location for a certain distance and trying to understand what the costs and the consequences of doing this type of work. And I think we're willing to try to do that in a small area. We don't have funding particular this year to do this, so we could look at that and try to figure out a cost, put it in the 2024 budget, and then come back to the city council with a report on our test zone area, if you will, our pilot area, and let you know what the cost was and how successful it was. So that's what staff's recommendation would be, rather than trying to modify the city code to call that a weed right now. So, and then on their fifth bullet, as indicated earlier, we do plan to include the Environment Board and the Natural Area Stewards in the development of our parks plan. That again is just starting up. We'll set meetings with them and present their input in the final report that we won't expect until December of 23 or November, December area. So.
Councilmember Ravel.
Well, yeah, I appreciate all the input from staff, and very appreciate Mr. Walker hanging in there till we got to this part of the agenda. Well, I mean, there's so many things that we could do and should do in terms of our landscaping and our environment and I think we need, and they all cost money, and I'd rather have us have priorities. So I would say I'd put more money into expanding our tree canopy, for example, and some of these other types of things that we really, really want to do too. So
Maintaining and
right,
properly
right,
growing our tree canopy,
Right.
but maintaining our existing tree canopy.
Right,
as
that too,
well.
all of that,
Yes.
yeah. And I did learn today from Wendy Pollock that in fact a lot of homeowners happily have buckthorn hedges on their property. So if we suddenly made it a weed, we could be in enforcement difficulties. So, and I'm really glad to hear that, you know, the Environment Board will be heavily involved and consulted in terms of the strategic plan. They have, you know, really wonderful expertise, and we'll have a lot to contribute to that plan.
Right, and it's more than just sports fields. So there's
right.
areas that are used by the Parks and Recreation for camps that aren't a sports field per se, but in the summer when the camp's there, it's playground area, more or less, so.
Ms. Pollock, if you're still with us, I wanted to allow you an opportunity to provide any last comments that you may have after hearing from city staff.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. And they're absolutely right. They're doing a lot already to move in this direction of reduced mowing and focusing on trees. I did just want to point out there actually have been excellent pilots of removing buckthorn and replacing it along the North Shore Channel that in the Arboretum over the last several years, thanks partly to grants that community members worked with city staff to get. We've removed most of buckthorn all along a substantial portion and replaced it with native plants. So we do know what that costs. Same in Canal Shores and Harbert Park, there are already efforts. And I'll just say community members love doing that kind of volunteer work. So there are a lot of people out there who will do it for free. So if we get to the point where we want to do estimates of what it would cost to expand that work, we do have some basis for doing that already. But yeah, it sounds good. And I totally agree about focusing on making sure the trees are maintained and grow to be big. And I think we can do a lot. We have a lot of community members out there and great staff who are very collaborative. So I think working together, we can push this forward. So thank you. Sounds like a good outcome for tonight. Thank you.
I mean, and if there's support, I certainly would, because Ms. Pollock mentioned, took it where I was going to take it. So there's, several, the canal kind of follows along the Fifth Ward on several parts. And I do think if we continue to pay attention to the buckthorn and honeysuckle issue within along the channel, that we can not only create a better space for other animals, but also make it potentially more walkable, and which has a benefit to community members. And I think we can do so much more along the channel if we continue to pay attention to it and maintain it and preserve it in the way that I have seen volunteers do on both sides of the channel. So since we may already have the information we need to come up with those cost estimates, as long as there's no extra cost to the city, I would love at the next Human Services Committee meeting to at least come back with those estimates. Again, as long as there's no cost to the city in terms of time or money. And then Councilmember Harris, sorry about that.
It's okay. So I just took a nature walk with Commissioner Josina Morita, and we learned about the buckthorn and the honeysuckle actually on the first. And there's other groups out there that are available and want to help get rid of the buckthorn. So if we could investigate any of that, I think on a voluntary status and get the community involved and engaged in it, I think they'd be more than willing.
I think that is, trying to see if I had anything else. Eradicate, reducing mow frequencies. Okay, yeah, I think we've covered everything. Was there anything else, Councilmember Revelle? Any other recommendations from the Environment Board? Okay. Last thing, Kara Pratt, I never get the title right. I know it's sustainability, resiliency, now manager now, right? Right? Is it manager now? I think it's manager now since we added the position. So I wanted to hear from you if you have any comments about, I wish I would have did this earlier, to be honest, but I see you there. If you had any comments you wanted to make about anything that we've discussed today, I wanted to also allow you that opportunity.
Really briefly, I wanted to also bring up the stormwater master planning process, because in an ideal future where we have perhaps a stormwater.
And Kara, would you
utility-
mind just letting us know what your title is again, just so I can remember it?
Sustainability and Resilience Coordinator.
Coordinator, okay.
So if we have a stormwater master plan that includes a stormwater utility, then ideally projects like promoting native planting on private property could help offset any costs that anyone would pay for a stormwater fee. That's how a lot of communities operate. So I dream of a future like that. And I think that the stormwater master planning process is a big part of naturalizing yards as well.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, if there's nothing else, seeing no more items before us, the meeting is adjourned, and the next Human Services Committee meeting will be
February the 6th.
February the 6th. Do we have a time yet? Probably the same time?
Probably the same time. 5
Probably
p.m.
same time, 5 p.m. All right, everybody. Thank you.